Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first clinical conversation, just answering connection questions online. And I'm just going to pop up here really quick for you, just a couple of questions that came in so you could see them. So the first question, just while Tracy's looking up the details of that, and I kind of have some of it in my memory, was kind of a clinical question. And we thought that would be a really great way to start out because it is very reflective of many of the questions that we get at Vital Links and that you all send in. And I'm just wondering, is the person who answered that question or asked that question here? And if so, you could just type to me in the chat box, yes, it was me, so that I could even potentially ask you some more questions. And if you're not here and you were planning on listening to the recording later, that's perfectly fine. So it's a clinical question about an 11-year-old girl. And the question was about what is the best way to sort of turn on someone's system? So if that rings a bell, for anyone that's here right now, if you could kind of go ahead and let me know that you're here and that I could ask you a few more questions about the case. And if not, I think I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And I have most of it from memory. So it was a 11-year-old young lady. And the question was, I have this 11-year-old girl who has a history of doing therapeutic listening and a lot of core and body strengthening work. However, she still trips and she doesn't notice toothpaste on her face. So what would you say is the best way to turn on the system? So turn on the nervous system from a sensory integrative standpoint. And so for me, the best way to approach this case is, this is what I'm wondering. If I want to know how to turn on the system, I have to know where the system was at. Oh, great. Thank you, Amanda. So Amanda is here, and Amanda, you can answer some of my questions. And just to start out, I would want to know, Amanda, if you can give me what she's done with therapeutic listening, if she did do that with you. And maybe, I'm not sure, Tracy, can we let Amanda come on camera and just chat about it a little bit? Is that something that you have control of, that you can unmute her and she can come on camera?
Yeah, I can ask her if she'd like to unmute herself.
Yeah, she doesn't mind. And Amanda, just so you know, we're recording this. So if you do come on camera, that's kind of, you're giving us your permission to use the recording. And if you don't want to come on camera and you just want to stay in the chat box, that's perfectly fine too.
Nope, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello, it's so great to see a face behind a question. I love this.
Yeah.
So, did she do therapeutic listening with you?
So she did. We started that. They are a very busy family. Dad is a pastor and mom is a school teacher.
Okay.
Yes.
And what did she listen to?
So I started out, I think, with links to modulation in the hopes that she would just start tuning in.
Okay.
Okay. And I want to say we went to Quick Shifts Regulation 2 next. She has a lot of anxiety. She startles. And it almost seemed like with every chip, we would get a little bit where it'd be like, oh, like it's working.
But it didn't stick, right?
Yeah. And then it would just, it'd go away. I mean, she'd be coloring. I'd be like, oh, what do you notice? And she'd be like, oh, yeah. And then she would go back and, she'd start coloring better, or like she would trip and she'd be like, oh, that was there.
Great. So you saw the glimmers, but here's what my impression is, and I think this is the challenge of doing therapeutic listening, is that it requires a lot of detective work, and that's really big, but I think it's easy. She's a perfect case for our first case. So when I love the way you say turn on the system. Of all the sensory systems, what turns on the system the most, and we can explore that neurologically, is the vestibular system. Everything has movement in it, but we always have to remember that it partners with all of the other senses, particularly somatosensory, meaning tactile, proprioceptive. So what is And I like to simply say, what is her body doing and how is she responding to gravity? And my guess is that's not good.
She's not. So we did the astronaut protocol 2 times a week for at least the first year.
Okay.
And I still wasn't getting that. I took your sensory diet. So I've tried stepping back and having her at home do a lot of work, like pushing through her feet, or I even gave her a ball to take home. And so she's just every day for 5 minutes, she's gonna, I'm having her do stuff with that ball to see about starting at ground level.
Okay, good. You're completely on the right track. I think the thing that we need to think about is frequency, intensity, duration. And I think we should look at how she organizes her body and how much vestibular input. She might need more vestibular intensity. So if we go back to the music, what we want to put in is things with a heavy rhythm. So if you want to stay in quick shifts, you would use things like gravitational grape, bilateral integration, because I think she's not somebody who's not tuning in because of defense. I think she needs more information. She might do well.
Okay.
She's 11 with like something like the pop tunes if we're in quick shifts. If we're going to stay in modulated, and that would be, did she have a lot of ear infections? Is she really having trouble listening? You know, are we just trying to turn on the body, or do we really want to get the ear focused? And you can turn on the body first and then go after the ear if you think that that's what you want to do. So then when you go to modulated, she's somebody who, yeah, I think a Mozart for modulation would be good, but then I'd probably move right over into that second box. And
Do you think Mozart for modulation would be too complicated though if her ears
no.
Okay.
No, we use Mozart for modulation. See, this is great that we can have a conversation. Do you see how this would be 20 emails? I love this. So no. Mozart for modulation is in that first box because it's really pretty simple for Mozart music, and it has a full range of orchestral music so that it really goes from the body up to the ear in a basic way. But I'd go something like apricot jams, potentially a Baroque for modulation when you're in that second box. And I don't know, Tracy, if you have another idea. I think she could also possibly do strawberry jams that would give you a little bit of a turning on of the emotion as well. Mm-hmm. So, and then I would think about in every core activity, it's like, I feel like you have the pieces, it's putting them together. So if I had her, but that's hard. See, that's what years of experience, and that's what we're here to support with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when she's on the power up ball, I'd be holding it and rolling across the floor with her body. She'd have to organize her body around it, and I'd roll around the room. I'd roll around obstacles. I would roll with a partner so that there was more intensity in it. It's just an idea.
That was next on my list to send home. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. But I think if you can get the music in, and if the family, and I understand, can follow through, but I think maybe even starting with the quick shifts with heavy rhythms, because what we saw in the research was that, and it was our clinic-based research that we did with Dr. Wilbarger that I think some of you are familiar with. But we saw that all of the things relating to vestibular and anti-gravity, prone extension, supine flexion, standing balance were all improving in a 12-week period of listening to 15 minutes times a day. Mm-hmm. So I think that you could get some benefit and keep those changes. Okay. But I'm grateful for your question, because I think it's reflective of what happens a lot. And I had a phone call this morning from a friend who she's probably got 35 years of experience, and she called me about a tough case, not because I gave her all the answers and I know everything, because she wanted to talk it through. And she works in mental health, so she was teaching me all along in the conversation, like the mental health side, and I was putting the body side, and we were looking at it together. And we all need that, and that's partly why we started this as an experiment to see how it would work for people. To be able to do that. Does that make sense, Amanda, and give you a little bit more?
Thank you, because I really, for so long, they've been having to go to private pay, and I've really been trying to help this family out. And And I want to help her and help them. And I've been trying everything in my toolbox. So thank you.
Yeah. Just one last thing, you can look at astronaut training.
Yes.
You can look at that pre-astronaut training as a template and just look at do the exercises and feel and look at what the head is doing.
Okay.
That's all about moving the head in different orientations in space. And then you could create for her a gym ball dance or even a dance to her favorite piece of music where her head imitates that. You can imitate those movements, but it doesn't need to be so strict. Free it up and get it to be something she enjoys.
Okay.
And you can do a similar thing with the Power Up Ball. You can do a dance, or you can do like a flow movement sequence. Just string a bunch of things together and try to keep her body moving on the ball, even if it looks messy.
Okay.
Because part of it is my guess is it didn't happen in the beginning. And it's interesting now just being with watching my two granddaughters grow is it's messy. They don't come out and do perfect core things. They don't push up prone on elbows. It's all over the place. And then they find it for a minute and then it's all over the place. And it's in that all over the place that you're really mapping the body and then you're differentiating so then it becomes crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I think we think too hard, but yeah, you have to really think too hard for a long time before it becomes obvious to you, I think. But
yeah.
Thanks so much
I
for the
love
question.
adding all your stuff together. So thank you.
Okay, great. Awesome. And then Tracy, I think the next question was also another case. And I don't know if that person is here, but I think I'm remembering it potentially, maybe not with all of the details, but
it was about a little one about 9 months of age who was having some auditory sensitivities. In particular, the therapist was wondering about the sound of Velcro, what frequency range that falls in, but this little one is also presenting with auditory sensitivities to other environmental sounds like the vacuum and is described as an overall sensitive child.
Okay, so and the age again, I'm sorry, 9 months?
9 months.
Okay, so you have a 9-month-old, and so if you're going to do any listening, so is this person also with us today? Because we didn't ask you to write your names down with your questions. If you're here and you want to open up your mic and come on camera, feel free. Again, it's recorded, so you will be in the recording, just to it's a heads up on that privacy. And you don't have to. You could even type me a private message in the chat box if you want to ask me more questions after I give you some answers around this case. So what we know in our experience is that low frequency sounds actually can be quite triggering because they're how we're naturally wired to protect about things coming at us in a distance. And we often see low frequency sound sensitivity loading with tactile defensiveness. Long ago, Barbara Knickerbocker talked about how there were these how sensory systems kind of paired together in defensiveness. And she talked about the OTA, the olfactory, tactile, auditory triad, and how you often saw that they would strongly portray themselves together. Well, Velcro is in that low frequency range. So is paper ripping, anything that involves that you're hearing a movement is in the low frequency range, like clapping's in the low frequency range. So you're hearing a movement so that's low frequency. Since she's 9 months old, I would suggest whenever we have low frequency sound sensitivity, we think of two things. If we're in the quick shifts, and that would be the easiest place to start, we would do a regulation to quick shifts over the speakers for this little one. And I'm not sure what her mobility is, et cetera, but while she was playing on the floor and even if we're just doing it over the iPhone with something really close to her. If there was a reason that you felt that this 9-month-old should move into modulated, I would do a links to space. Another potential quick shift would be the space quick shift. All of them are going to have a special treatment to give you a better sense of the space. Regulation 2 actually removes some subtle frequencies just in a single frequency range that are known to be triggers for environmental sounds bothering you. So that's the easiest, the gentlest place to start. The space quick shift gives you a clearer sense of the space, because sometimes that, oh, good. Sometimes that is because you really haven't somehow triggered the mapping that's low in the brainstem, which is really possible for a young one. Could be something that happened at birth or something else, where the sensory processing of the mapping of space at the lowest level is not quite been stimulated into existence, I guess is the best way to say it, or inputted into existence or activated. And using space or nature sound. So the gentlest way to do that is with a quick shift. And then a question came off the heels of that, and Amanda's asking, she has an eight-month-old, would it not be within norms to react to low frequency sounds due to still having that protective auditory system? We have the protective auditory system throughout our whole life. It's the size of the reaction. And is that reaction getting in the way? So is the baby stiffening and holding their breath? And in babies, we look for, you might see a Moro, you might see the goalpost arms that don't soften, or they might soften into a fist, or you might see the toe curling. And you might see that the babies do this scrunching down thing like a Valsalva maneuver. You might see them doing that, which is getting in the way of potentially, bottle, like digestion with some reflux. So you might be seeing that baby for another reason. So the protective stuff is all really fairly clear in the body because they have such fresh reflexive systems, but they're too stiff. And you'll see it in the stiffness, and then the release that doesn't quite happen. They don't let go of all the tension once the sound resolves. So it is within a certain range, but if it's really creating irritation and the baby is becoming upset and they're holding strong tension in their body, then that is where we would intervene and treat. So let me see. I think, Tracy, we might have time here for one more question.
Sure. The last question that came in was kind of a compilation of a couple questions regarding the different selections within therapeutic listening and any updates to titles of selections and any new pieces of music within modulated music.
So I'm wondering, were you able to resurrect the slides on your screen? That was kind of my, I didn't quite have those. I couldn't quite get to those and get back to my screen. That was my problem, but okay. But I do have another question. So let me just take that. And if you have a chance to pop up, I think that is where a visual is warranted. And if you don't,
okay,
if we could just take it one by one, the points on the slide after I finish Jen's question. She wants to know, what frequency would you say laughter is? I have a 1.5-year-old who reacts to laughter if her parents laugh, but not to other sounds. That's really interesting. Again, it's in the low frequency range. So the inner ear, the saccula of the inner ear responds to low frequency vibration up to about 800 hertz. And that's all the vowel ranges. And so ha 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 is that sort of, sorry, that's kind of my fake laugh, those vowel sounds. And it might be the other thing that's going on, Jen, is that sudden onset, the surprise of it. And so that sensitivity to that could also be part of what's going on. Thank you, Tracy. You're ever so much more technically gifted than I am. So just people were wanting to know updates about therapeutic listening, people that have been doing listening for a long time. Our newer selections, Links to Modulation, started out with Easy Listening, and then we changed the name to Links to Modulation, and Links to Space was Easy Space before that. We also wanted to talk about, also in this category where people often go right away, as you did, Manda, for your girl to regulate and work with the anxiety, things using the easy listening music. We have 4 quick shifts that also are quite supportive in a very similar vein to what Links to Modulation and Links to Space would be. And I just really wanted, and Tracy, I don't know if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera and just, I feel like you do such a beautiful job differentiating those, if you would do that for us. Thanks,
sure.
Tracy.
So these 4 quick shifts, the regulation 1, 2, 3, and 4 are very similar in terms of the elements of music in a lot of ways. So they all use that easy listening style of music, but each one has a slightly different clinical application. Regulation 1 is really the most general of the 4 options, really good for clients who are presenting with overall difficulties with regulation, anxiety, maybe as a support for going to sleep at night. Regulation 2, as Sheila mentioned, has that unique addition of that notch filtering that we often find very helpful for clients who are presenting with not only regulatory difficulties, but the added component of auditory sensitivities that may be impacting their daily life. It may also present, as Sheila was talking about, in the body as an exaggerated startle or moro. The Regulation 3 quick shift we have found can be really helpful, as kind of coined the term as our temper tantrum tamperer. This one often can be really helpful when you're approaching that dysregulated state or prior to events that can lead to more dysregulation. If you know certain points in the day, certain events lead to more dysregulation, Regulation 3 can be really helpful for that. Starts out just a little bit more upbeat and almost meets you at that higher state of arousal, and then kind of calms you down from there. And Regulation 4 is similar in some ways to Regulation 2, that it has that same notch filtering, but it also can be really helpful when you are having difficulties with dysregulation and anxiety.
You know, and I think a wonderful thing that was shared with me by a colleague who works in quite a bit of trauma and attachment work. She said she loved the Regulation 4, especially what we see in the trauma and attachment world when we're working with kids that have that background that's more complex. They flip from high to low really quickly. And she really said Regulation 4 was her go-to when she had a child whose arousal was just flipping up and down, up and down. So really, really helpful for that. So I was like, I love our work and that we get to work with so many therapists from all over, because we all learn from each other and try to share that. I'm going to say, Tracy, if you can just come back and just touch on Nature Classics really quick. I'm going to mute and take care of this.
So Nature Classics is our newest piece of music within the modulated category. It is actually in, as the name would imply, in that spatial category of the modulated music under the engagement, the space side. Again, we tried to pick a name that is somewhat representative of kind of the music. So it uses not only that combination of nature sounds, but it also has the unique addition of classical music. And we find that this particular selection can be really helpful for clients who need even more clarity around that auditory spatial component. Maybe they're presenting more as a profile 2, profile 3, and you even want more clarity around organizing body and space. So thinking about praxis, ideation, motor planning, execution. We've seen this particular selection be really helpful in that capacity, but also as really a refinement of that spatial piece.
And I'm just thinking back to Amanda's client that she brought to us in the beginning. This has potential for that client, but you would want to make sure for her that adding nature sounds wasn't too complex. And she might really need the grounding, and that might pull her out too much, but it's certainly something that you could look at. So I think that's probably a great, Amanda said her brain is saying ding, ding. Great, perfect. That's what we pay attention to, Amanda, is our gut kind of knowing. Hey, well, I think this has been really great, and we will be back again next week where we'll do more. Please keep your questions coming. We have a couple of questions we didn't get to that we can start with next week. And certainly, hopefully more will roll in, but I appreciate it. And Amanda, thank you so much for coming on camera with us and having a discussion. It made this really, really rich. So we'll be back next week, same time.